Have you ever gotten to the end of a season and you realize that you're just completely burned out? Maybe you have some hints of overtraining syndrome. Maybe you're just mentally fried from all the training you're doing and being on most days of the week, or you're actually just getting hurt. There's a lot of ways in which we can break down at the end of a season, but we don't always have to. We don't always have to. We can stay strong all the way through the racing part of our season and through our final goal race. And in this video, I want to share 3 important ways that you can prioritize how you feel at the very end of your season so that you can put all the energy and focus you need to on your goal race. Now, breaking down can take a lot of different forms, so let's talk about each one. Now, if you are just feeling a little mentally burned out, this is when you're just not excited about your running anymore. You're starting to feel like you could really use some time off, and you just don't want to be doing the hard workouts, the long runs, and the more difficult aspects of your training. That's one aspect of just breaking down. That's more like a psychological breakdown. But you can also break down physically with overtraining syndrome. Overtraining syndrome is almost like an endocrine system failure where you have been training so hard and not recovering enough that you are experiencing physiological symptoms of breaking down. If you got a great blood test, you probably would see high levels of cortisol. You might see high levels of I believe it's C-reactive protein, which shows a lot of muscle damage. And you're probably going to find that even when you go out for an easy run, your heart rate is really, really high. Then, of course, the final way of breaking down during your season is when you get hurt, when you actually get injured and you can't continue on with your season. So let's start talking about all the different ways that we can build a better season so that you're not breaking down at the end of it. All right, the first way that we are going to ensure that we don't start breaking down at the end of a season is to make sure that we're actually prepared for all the hard work our season includes. And the best way of doing that is by building a big base of endurance before your season really starts. So this is where a solid season of base training becomes very, very important. If you spend a long time building your aerobic metabolism, focusing on gradually inching up your weekly and monthly mileage, if you are focusing on aerobic workouts and really building, your endurance, you're going to have a lot more bandwidth to get in those hard workouts and have them not take so much out of you. So if you are training for any kind of race, a base season is really going to be helpful for you. So this is step number 1. Let's actually make sure that we're prepared for our season. Okay, step number 2, what we're going to do is we're going to properly periodize your season. Periodization simply means that different parts of your season have different goals. And at the very beginning of your season, you're not going to be doing the very race-specific workouts that you're probably going to be doing at the very end of your season. So if you're doing very hard workouts, for the marathon, it might be 20 miles with the final 10 miles at goal marathon pace, or if you're training for a 5K, it might be something like 3 times a mile at your goal 5K pace with a very short recovery. Now, these are very specific workouts to these races, but they're also very difficult workouts. These are very, very challenging workouts. And if you're going to do these workouts, we can only do them sparingly, usually in the second half of your season, close to your goal race, as you are trying to peak your fitness. If you don't understand periodization, that's okay. I'm going to put a link under this video to a very detailed article that's going to explain everything for you. But just remember that periodization simply means that your training has to have different goals as you move through a season. And if you're focusing on the wrong thing at the wrong time, the chance of you breaking down in some way at the end of that season is going to be a lot higher. If everything hurts, I want to introduce you to today's video sponsor, Previnex. Previnex makes some of my favorite supplements because they're a supplement company that is voluntarily putting themselves under a lot more scrutiny than other supplement brands. They are testing finished products and raw ingredients, and they use clinically proven ingredients, and that is true for their latest product, Muscle Health Plus. I love this stuff mixed with some really cold water. It tastes delicious. And this is your anti-soreness supplement. This combines creatine monohydrate in the highest form, which means it's gonna be better absorbed by your body. And if you happen to have GI distress with creatine, you probably won't with Muscle Health Plus. And it also includes branched chain and essential amino acids and ingredients that are gonna help you better absorb all of these essential nutrients and aid protein synthesis. Because as we get older, especially 40 plus like me these days, you are not as good at synthesizing protein, so you need to take in more and hopefully use a supplement that's gonna help you synthesize all that protein. So if you're someone who's very sore after long runs or workouts, or you're over 40 and you wanna stave off that inevitable decline of muscle mass, I know I do, look into Muscle Health Plus by Previnex. There's a link under this video to learn more, and if you use code STRENGTHRUNNING, you're gonna save 15% off your first purchase. Thank you, Previnex, for partnering with us and offering some of my favorite supplements. All right, the last thing we're gonna do to help you not break down at the end of a season is to make sure that your season just isn't too long. Longer seasons are not better seasons. So I don't want you to think that just because your season's super long, that gives you even more time to prepare and you're gonna have a better outcome. Often that's not the case. It's just simply too much time to spend on one goal, and you definitely can spend too much time in each individual phase of a season. So for example, base training is actually one of my favorite phases of training because I think it's so fundamental and so developmental, but you can't spend 6 months in base training. There's a lot of other things that we have to do as runners that we're just not really going to really experience if we're in base training. And then of course, if you're spending too much time in the competitive phase of your training where you are doing a ton of really hard workouts, that's also unsustainable because you're gonna end up getting burned out or overtrained or injured just from all that intensity. So let's make sure our season is an adequate length, probably 12 to 20 weeks, depending on how much time you have to prepare and the distance of the race that you're training for. A lot of middle distance runners might prefer a shorter training cycle, where a lot of half marathoners or marathoners might prefer a slightly longer training cycle. And as long as it's usually somewhere between 12 and 20 weeks, you're gonna have a really good length of season so that you're focusing on what you need to focus on, building the fitness that you need, and then you have the time necessary to properly execute on it. So if you're finding yourself breaking down at the end of a season, you can't get through to your goal race before you start feeling burned out, feel like you just wanna take a break. I know I felt like this usually at the end of a lot of my cross-country seasons, because cross-country in college has a big base phase, and then you're in season for about 2.5 months. That's a long time without any structured time off. So let's make sure our training is periodized well, that we have a big well of aerobic fitness and endurance before we start the hard workouts. And let's make sure our season isn't too long. If you can do all these things, you're gonna be in a really good position to not only run well at the end of your season, but also just have a really, really good performance and feel good doing it.